And then later in the future, he was a salesman of high-end antiques, but old boy suffered substance abuse, fraud. He was giving fake antiques to hustle, to make it, but on the outside, he was a successful young man. And I had that image until my incarceration.
Bad choices make good stories.
It's just this movie's deep and kind of, if you don't know what it is, you have to watch it to understand, because it shows in the beginning the family dynamic. You know, the individual loses his mom's life in a terrorist attack at an art museum, and through that, his mom sadly passes, but he ends up with this piece of art. But the kid doesn't know the worth. He takes it with him because his memory of his mom and stuff. But it's just deep because it goes to change how one thing can impact your whole life trajectory. And it shows how, you know, family dynamics, where his mom passed and went to his dad's, and his dad was gambling, alcoholic, and how his dad, you know, was trying to take advantage of his son. So it just shows how, you know, hiccups in life and stuff like that kind of redirect our trajectory. But it starts off that where he leaves his dad and goes to New York, and then it jumps to him in the future and how he got into antique dealing. But he also met a little Russian friend when he was in Vegas, and him were real close, but not knowing that his Russian friend stole the artwork. But in short, it's just using how, you know, outside circumstances changes our trajectory of our lives, and we don't know it till the end.
Right.
You know, now that we're older, so it's your stories and my stories, we look back like, ooh, those various few moments that completely change our lives to other ways. Like at the end, the main actor, like, he ends up having to commit a crime to protect his friend. And, you know, and then I can relate to a lot of things like that where, like, you know, I grew up decently, I grew up this, but I made choices, or I was put in situations where I make A or B. I had a crossroad. A was a slightly more positive route, and B was a slightly more negative route. And you could see, and that movie had a lot of Y intersects where it's like, it changes you, it grows, it develops, you know, and you meet friends in different positions when you're in a bad position. I moved around a lot, you know, my dad was never around. So I met people and you try to find father figures and family members and just older kids. Even if it's only 2 years older, you look up to them, you make choices, you decide. So it's like, it's just a very complex movie, but it's like, I related to it intimately because, like, no one knew this guy was committing bad things. Like, and later in the future, he was a salesman of high-end antiques, but old boy suffered substance abuse, fraud. He was giving fake antiques to hustle, to make it, but on the outside, he was a successful young man. And I had that image until my incarceration that, oh, he's doing it. He's successful. He has cars. He has dressed well, educates well, all this. But it was all a lie.
Yeah, he was hovering between high society and the criminal underworld.
Yeah, you know.
And when you brought up him stealing the painting during the bombing that killed his mother, that painting was so symbolic to him. It represented, you know, grief, but also guilt and his connection to the past.
Correct.
Because it showed us that he wasn't trying to sell it. He was just holding
preserving
on to that,
it,
because it connected him to that past. And it seemed like all throughout the movie, anything that reminded him of the past, he tried to cling on to. Remember when, what was it, Patty or Pepper? Came back around. And
his little friend. That they were both in there.
He ran back into the Russian kid. He clinged on to him. Like anything that connected to his past, he clinged on to. Until later on in the movie, it started to see that he started to let go. The only way you could truly heal is by letting go.
Yeah, and making amends. Remember how his mentor at the antique store accepted him, like, I'll take you in, because he flew to New York, like, I'm leaving, and he took him in because he has that and showed him how to live. And that's what, like, I had mentors that showed me how to live, but sometimes we take advantage of their kindness, or you know, make it, but we have the image, we're living off the image, we're clean cut, we're businessmen, we're successful, but really you're clinging onto an image and not clinging off reality, because you're cutting edges, cutting corners, cheating, frauding, criminal activities. And that's what, like,
is it the thrill, or what's the
I think for him it was to make, in business world, to make numbers meet and to, you know, maintain his lifestyle. And then but his mentor didn't know that he was selling artificial artifacts, selling this. So like he had to come to the means, even with his mentor that gave him the life he had, showed him everything to live the productive life he has, but he was still cutting corners. And then, like how you mentioned, the painting was his past. He was holding on to it, but he never even had the painting. So he was holding on to an idea. Because remember, as we see in later on the Russian kid's like, "What do you mean? I'm sorry." He's like, "What do you mean? What are you sorry for? I took your painting." And he's like, "What the fuck?" Like he said, he cleaned onto an image, and he went in there and had the paper, the box that he opens is a textbook. So that's how we cling on to ideas, cling on to images, cling on to certain aspects.
Give us comfort.
But they're not real.
Exactly.
It's just a false sensation. So that was like true. And then how like.
And what was something that you clinged on to that you had to let go?
I think where I really started to let go is in prison. And I cling on this image like, I got bread, I got money, I'm stacked. And then lawyers, everything, you're not stacked. You can't hustle, you can't work, you're this. I got supposedly friends or people support me. I got, I have money, I have businesses, I had certain images, cars, clothes, the girls. But when you go to prison, certain aspects is that I'm cleaning onto this image, like how the main actor is like cleaning onto this clean cut image, high society, this, but he didn't really have any of it. It's all fake. And then when I was in prison, it's like you lose all this. Once you lose liberty, like you lose everything. That's not real. So when we got incarcerated, all these things that you're attached to that you thought were real, when you really think about it, you process it and they start leaving your life, you're like, they were never mine. So that was really interesting. I found that so I was cleaning onto this image. I was like a Russian nest doll. You pop it off, still an image. You pop it off, still an image. You pop it off, business, girls, money. At the end of the day, you're like, oh shit, I was really nothing. I was an image.
All right. And then another thing that was interesting to me in the movie is when his dad came back in his life. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
The way he despised his father, he still ended up becoming like his father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his dad was a substance abuse, fake criminal, wife, Las Vegas. He was just a low-level criminal hustling and bustling.
So it's like in life, most of us do the same thing. Whether we despise our father or our mother or whatever, we still somehow end up trailing that same path in some way. Was that the same for you?
I think that's actually a really good question. I've never been put it in that aspect. But I think that is fairly accurate because my dad was the best dad he could, but he didn't have a dad. He worked, he wasn't around for a long time of my life. So I was like a teenager, he was like work local. But you could say, for lack of a better thing, he wasn't a great husband. He was an unfaithful man, but he didn't have a role model either. He didn't know his dad. He hated his dad, and he tried to fill in that void. But this is a generation where they don't read books, they don't look, they don't have podcasts. They're very Latino. Like, I got this, but what are you basing it off? You never had a dad. You never had. So when you look at that, you can see why they. But like my dad, wasn't a great husband. He was a provider, did his best in that aspect, provided a decent life. But like, when I was previous to incarceration, I wasn't a great boyfriend. I had the image, this, but for lack of better, I was unfaithful. Unfaithful to friends, unfaithful to this, unfaithful to my relationships. And in a lot of ways, those are similar characteristics as him. Oof. So similar characteristics as him, and then that's when you grow into that. So that's when the aspect is that building those similar characteristics. You're building those characteristics of an image that you despise.
And I love the concept of story, giving everything its value. You know what I'm saying? Story is always included as to what gives something or someone value. When we look at the Goldfinch, the story that's attached to it gives it extreme value. The real Goldfinch, for all those that don't know, because the book was written by Donna Tartt and it got transferred into a movie. But the real Goldfinch was actually the last painting. of the painter.
Yep.
You know, and whether she realized it or not, by wrapping a whole storyline around that painting, increase the value of the original painting even more.
Yeah.
So I say all this to say, when we create pieces of art, like we're doing this interview right now, the stories that's attached to it already, it gives it value. But as it goes throughout life, when Pablo's story impacts somebody else's and changes the trajectory of their path, gives this content even more value. You know what I'm saying? So when the art pieces transfer to different hands, the stories that they're attaching themselves to increases the overall value of the painting.
Yeah.
And when I just did a commercial job recently, I seen a lady with a jacket on that said "Bad choices make good stories."
Yeah.
So tragedy is, oddly enough, is what gives value to our lives.
Correct.
What does that make you think about? Like, when you think
that's actually well said. You couldn't have said it any better. But the thing is, I believe humans are made for challenge. Like a lot of people, like, oh, I just want to chill, work-life balance, relax. I was like, but challenges make us who we are.
Right.
It also makes us who we aren't.
Right.
So a lot of people, I'm this image. Where you're stuck with challenges, are you that?
Right.
Are you that person? And then that's when you find out. So humans are made for challenge. Humans are made to overcome. Humans are made to grow. And growing, like we have that common phrase, growing pains. So in a lot of ways, that's where you see. Humans are made for challenge. When you give a human a very standard life, like, we can even look at the statistics of suicide rate.
Right.
And the higher echelons of society, way higher. Right. Because they've been, not that they've been given life, but they've been given more comfort. And so when they lose that little level of comfort, what do I do? But when people have lived that and earned and learned, the disadvantaged communities, how society likes to put them, is like has a way lower suicide rate than upper society, right? Why is that? Is it more challenges? Is it more this? Or is this more like, I don't got time to think about suicide. I got to make life work, And when people, but in a sense, it's like challenges is who we are.
What would you say is the overarching lesson of the movie that you carry with you in the real world?
I think that's a good question, but I think the biggest overarching lesson is simple fact that, that movie for me was so diverse. It's so, family problems, friendships, to kids in traumatic relationships, dirtbag fathers on both ends that just change and pivot their lives. And the most thing that I would find value is that, in the movie, he lives off an image. And that's the artwork. And he didn't have it half his life. So he's living off that. And it's like, for me, it's like we're all those kids. We're all that little Russian kid, that little white kid. And that's commonality is that we know trauma. We don't know how to process it. We don't know how to live through it. We don't know how to understand how it benefits us or harms us. Because traumas, it's going to happen. But the incident of trauma is not what matters. It's what happens in us with that traumatic incident. And like how I think my girlfriend mentioned to me, there's that situation where it's like, we're all kids with a lot of trauma trying to be adults. So in a lot of aspects, like I live behind images. Image was huge for me. Success, cool, hip, bitches, money. And none of it was real though. It was something I was trying to live and fit in, something I was trying to be, and that's not how I was.
Peeling back those layers, or have they completely stepped out of that and stepped into who you are?
I think who I am is a growing process because I want to do stuff. I got small businesses I'm opening, doing hustling, bustling, finishing up UCSD, graduating this summer, and I'm just trying to find ways to be true to myself. Because the whole concept of that movie was that each of the individual was never true to himself after the loss of his mom. He was trying to fit, trying to find way. And the last thing he had was the paint. But him taking the paint after that scene was him holding on to his mom. But that pivoted his life to extreme directions. And not only him, but the little Russian kid pivoted his life into crime and pivoted. And at the end of the day, what changed us, we go back and we have to make amends. Within ourselves, within our community, with our family. We have to make amends for the bad we've done when we pivot from the truth. So it's very important that I had to make amends in prison. We talked about we were in Sin 6 or with Carlos in this. We talked a lot of how to reflect. We were in groups. We're finding ways to learn. We're finding ways to that. And then it's like how we talked about earlier. It's like, some of the most hardcore criminals we met were victimized at youth.
Right, for sure.
And that's what made them into, I'm not going to be victimized anymore. I'm going to be the victimizer. Exactly. And we look at that in the Russian guy. And we look in the movie again, is he lived a fake life. He had the girlfriend that society wanted. He had the job that society wanted. He had the friends society wanted. It was all based off a lie. And I lived that. I lived a very productive lie where you're like, that fool's doing it. Only if they knew. I was the definition of imposter syndrome. Just imposter syndrome. Yeah, the definition of a lie.
Right. And it's like when kids go through trauma puts us in a state of denial.
Yeah.
In every stage and every form of it. You know what I'm saying? To deny the pain that trauma brings and brought. You know what I'm saying? And violence can be a form of denial.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Lashing out, acting out of control in order to feel in control of what you actually being controlled by, which is that traumatic experience. And we seen it from Theodore every step of the way. And I live my life that way. You know what I'm saying? Denying the poverty, denying the things that I went through. You know what I'm saying? That was traumatic. And to feel like I was dominating that trauma. You know what I'm saying? By dominating other people.
Yeah.
So what was some of the denial traits that you suffered from prior to making that change?
That money made me who I was. So I was like, I didn't grow up, I didn't grow up poor. I moved around a lot, different cultures, born in Puerto Rico, moved out here to California over the time, but denied myself truth because I was living everyone else's truth. Right. This guy's committing certain things. I can do that better. And I was not, how people, like how you said, you suffered frustration, you took it on other people. Like me, I looked at, I don't want to say power, but like influence, that I could go to certain cities and be like, hey, boo-boo, your boy knows me. Here, this influence, like calls, everything was a call away. So I try to fit this image that I wasn't. I wasn't that. That wasn't my life. So I wasn't even my people. Like I didn't care for that. The money. And I don't want to say power, influence. And I like the image. We get addicted to the image. We get addicted. Definitely today we're in social media where people get addicted to these falsehoods. And they think it's true. Truth is being challenged right now. But you got to have your own internal truth. But it has to be based off the right compass. Because you know me. I don't have social media. I don't have certain aspects. So I always try to focus on my internal truth. Sometimes sometimes the society pushes on me like, ooh, look at this. No, my internal truth, stay humble and just become the best version of myself.
That's powerful. And tell the people what you got going on like today.
Fortunately, I'm graduating from UCSD in the next couple months. Work with a lot of programs, youth champions, how to battle. Another one's juvenile halls, art programs, designing creative futures. I love to give back. I got finished up school, got small businesses, but I got my little pet project finally going. Got my little computer engineers from Spain finishing up my MVP, but it's a minimal viable product for my SaaS company, software as a service, to provide legal data analytics. So, I'm moving and grooving, but trying to stay true to myself and, try to be a decent man.
Yeah, and I want to really shed light on what he does because he's one of the few people that doesn't have social media, but he's making an impact every step of the way. Gang of organizations, for-profit, non-profit, so y'all heard it here. Pablo Ascencio, how his life relates to the movie, The Goldfinch. Y'all go watch it. Y'all continue to share, like, subscribe to the channel. We'll have more content, as time go on. As long as God continue to make people and people continue to make movies, we're going to continue to make content.
And tragedy continues to make stories.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
How can the fruit grow healthy if it's a rotten tree? They brainwashed me and tainted my perception young. It's hard to have vision when you blind, deaf, and dumb. Our example was destructive, last of a dying seed. How can the fruit grow healthy if it's a rotten tree? They brainwashed me with this false propaganda. It's hard to grow healthy when your culture got the cancer.